everyone, and welcome back to We Sometimes Talk About Thrillers on Thursdays. My name is Katie and I'm excited to review, spoiler-free, one of the biggest horror novel releases of the year, which of course is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. Now, I loved Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, but I did not enjoy Final Girl Support Group. I have reviews of both of those where I get into more detail why. So although I was very excited for this release, I was trying to not have my expectations through the roof. Also, please let me know, have you read Horror Store or My Best Friend's Exorcism, because I haven't read either and I'm trying to decide which one to read next. But let's go ahead and dive into the review, and again, everything will be spoiler free. So first, for what this is about, our protagonist is Louise, and first it starts off a little bit back in time. We find out she's in her 30s, dating someone, and finds out she's pregnant, but she's not incredibly interested in the guy, so it jumps forward to present day. A few years later, she's raising Poppy, her daughter, and she finds out, unfortunately, that both of her parents back in Charleston have passed away in a car accident. So she leaves Poppy with Poppy's father and flies home for the funeral to see her family, all of that, and where chaos starts to ensue is when she has to try and sell her parents' house with her little brother Mark, who lives in Charleston. They have a horrible relationship, and as you can tell by the title, the big issue they run into when trying to sell it is that the house is of course haunted in a very strange way, which I won't spoil in this video. So as usual, I'll talk about pros, cons, and then we'll give it my creepy candle rating at the end. First off, for pros, I don't know that everyone would agree with me on this, but I actually really like how Grady Hendrix writes women, and I can't say that for all male horror novelists. And although Louise is a flawed person, she felt very realistic to me, and I really enjoyed her character a lot. My favorite aspect of this book was without a doubt the brother-sister relationship, especially once you start to see Mark's point of view and some of his backstory. So many books that I read, although I won't lie, I like a little bit of romance in my books, but a lot of horror novels tend to either have a single woman and she's getting interested in the guy throughout the book, or it's a married woman. And I liked that the main relationship that's being looked at in this book was a brother-sister relationship, a sibling relationship, which I don't see very often, not just in horror novels, but in books in general. And although their relationship is one with a lot of anger, it's also very funny as well. Which that leads into what I also really liked about this book. The humor was just spot on. There were so many scenes where I really found myself smiling and actually laughing out loud. There's moments like that where I also could really see this easily adapted into a movie, which I will say, this doesn't make sense given that they're married in real life, but this is how I picture the casting for Louise and Mark. In terms of the horror pieces of this book, there was a lot of really intense graphic body horror, and it reminded me a little bit, again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but in Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, there's this scene with like a centipede going into the main character's ear because she's trying to hide and be quiet, and there's some weird creepy moments like that, but there's also just a lot of straight up blood and gore, and it was terrifying to read. I saw a lot of reviews giving away what is haunted in the house, and personally I'm not gonna say, just because I managed to go into this book pretty much completely blind. All I'll say is that it's kind of funny and unusual, and it really made me laugh. Not crazy unusual, there are other movies who have done this type of horror before, but just the way it's done has a really interesting backstory, but also a lot of humor as well. So as you can see, there was a lot that I really had to love about this book, but let's go ahead and get into the cons. I really don't have many when it comes to cons, but I will say that the gory scenes you also could classify as action sequences because it's Mark and Louise fighting something, you know, what's haunting the house. I don't love body horror in movies, but I really like it in books. Those pieces I thought were done well, but there was just a lot of chasing and fighting scenes that I think, and again, this is not a critique of the book, it's just my personal taste. I think a lot of people would probably really enjoy those scenes, but they just felt like they dragged on a little bit to me. So those are my pros and cons. I'm gonna give the rating, and then I'm gonna say how I think this compares to Grady Hendrix's other books. So in the end, I really enjoyed this, and I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5 creepy candles. As for how this compares to his other books, I would rank this just below Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I don't think that this is necessarily written any worse or was worse of a book, but just Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires are just more my cup of tea in terms of plot points for what was happening. Really enjoyed this just below this, and not surprisingly, Final Girl Support Group is way down. So please let me know, have you read this? What did you think about it? And again, if you've read any of his other books, which one do you think I should be reading next? And I hope it gave you a little bit of a feel for whether or not you want to check it out, but I'll see you in the next one. If you want to take a second, please go ahead and like this video. It really helps me out, and go ahead and subscribe if you're interested in more horror and thriller reviews.